علمتنا وزدنا علما ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير واشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. First of all, please accept my apologies. I was actually giving a talk at a different place, and quite conveniently they placed another speaker before me when I was meant to be the first speaker to speak. Alhamdulillah, it's always great to be here, and I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the opportunity to learn about one of the greatest prophets who came to preach to mankind, who came to teach to his people about the true values of Islam, and he came at a time where idolatry was something that was rampant, and he came to a people who were very hostile and aggressive towards him. And this was the nature of all the prophets. Whenever they came to different nations, you found that it was the case that quite often the people were quite hostile towards their prophets. Allah says, كَذَلِكَ مَا أَتَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ مِنْ رَسُولٍ إِلَّا قَالُوا سَاحِرٌ أَوْ مَجْنُونٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us an account and a report of how the prophets were treated by the people, and quite often it was the case that people would trivialize their message and they would belittle them, and the way they would trivialize the message is by trying to tarnish their character, and by tarnishing their character, anything that is born out of this person, anything that emanates from this person naturally has no credibility. And so it's what we call diminished reputation, right? And so what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَذَلِكَ مَا أَتَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ مِنْ رَسُولٍ إِلَّا قَالُوا سَاحِرٌ أَوْ مَجْنُونٌ. That whenever prophets went to their people, what you found was that they were met with this hostile remark, this very aggressive tone, and that people would say that ultimately you're either a magician or you're absolutely crazy. You're someone who has a you're mentally incapacitated. And so what you find is that Younus alayhi salatu wasalam came to a people who also were quite hostile towards him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in fact has named an entire surah under his name, known as Surah Younus, in which he discusses the accounts that took place. Historians tell us that actually Younus alayhi salatu wasalam came to the place in Iraq known as Mosul, and what happened was ultimately the prophets were dispatched to their respective communities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always ensured that whenever a prophet went to their people, that they were the best people for the job. They had not just an adequate level of information about the people, but quite often we find that they would grow up in that particular community so that they would know the ins and outs of the social psychology and the individual psychology of their people. And that's why if you look at one of the greatest accounts of prophethood within our history, we find that Musa alayhi salatu wasalam didn't grow up in his mom's house, he rather grew up in the house of Fir'aun himself. And if anybody asks, well, what's the hikmah behind that? The hikmah ultimately is, on one hand, that it will open up pathways, and it will be easier for Musa alayhi salatu wasalam to preach to Fir'aun, because he knows the psychology of Fir'aun. He's been around him, he knows how he works. At the same time, Fir'aun isn't receiving the message from an alien prophet or a prophet who he doesn't know. And so the level of familiarity then in fact gives some kind of a mutual ground for you to actually preach the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ. And we did not send a message except with the tongue of his people. The tongue of his people. And here the ulama, when they say, what does it mean by بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ? What does the tongue of your nation mean? It means that you're acquainted with their language, you know how they speak, but you also know their mindset, and you also know the art of communication. You understand their social psychology, you understand the individual, and so you're able to communicate with them. So in this sense, Younus alayhi salatu wasalam was an advocate. He was someone who was able to clearly reach out to his people and speak to them in the most profound of ways. And he proliferated the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a very clear way to his people. What we learn is that his people rejected him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that ultimately Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, he became angry, and we'll deal with that later on. But let us just try and understand how the prophets, what they had to endure, what they had to go through. The nature of the prophets was that their level of tolerance with their people was much more than anybody else. The tolerance that we have is not equal to the tolerance of the prophets. The prophets were people who were ready to absorb insults, accusations, anything that's thrown at them, they'll absorb it like a sponge. We know that because throughout the history of prophethood, including the likes of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam, it's after 950 years that he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to punish his people. After 950 years, but throughout his entire life he'd be making dua for them. The same with the likes of, if you look at the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself, when Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam came and said, let me crush the people of Ta'if in between the two mountains, he said, no, perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will create from their generation people who will believe in me and people who will help me. And so prophets always had a high level of tolerance. So Younus alayhi salatu wasalam had this high level of tolerance with his people. When his people rejected him, he didn't just walk out, as people would say. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَذَنُّونِ إِذْ ذَهَبَ مُغَاضِبًا. And remember when the one who possessed the fish, meaning Dhannun, some say it means the Lord of the whale, because Dhannun in Arabic can refer to the actual whale itself that Younus alayhi salatu wasalam was in. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that وَالذَّنُّونِ إِذْ ذَهَبَ مُغَاضِبًا. And remember when Younus alayhi salatu wasalam effectively walked out of his people whilst he was very angry, he was frustrated with them. فَظَنَّ أَن لَن نَقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ. And so he thought that he will not be held to account for this. فَنَادَى فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ أَن لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ. We know that ultimately when he was trapped in the body of the whale, when he was trapped in its stomach, then we know that he called out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he said that there is no God except for you, there's nobody worthy of worship except for you. Subhanak, that you're above everything. Exalted is your position and your stature, you're above any human resemblance. Inni kuntu min al-zalimin. Indeed, I am from one of those who have done wrong. This is a central piece of the story of Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, which has been related to us in Surah Al-Anbiya, and I'll discuss that inshallah in a few minutes. The relevance between the story of Younus alayhi salatu wasalam and Ramadan is what? The relevance is that Younus alayhi salatu wasalam was able to admit to his flaws and his mistakes, and he was able to acknowledge that he'd gone wrong. And in the same way, you and I, we go wrong in our lives, in the many things that we do. وَعْلَمْ بِأَنَّكَ إِن طَلَبْتَ مُهَذَّبًا لَقَدْ رُمْتَ الشَّطَطِ مَنْ ذَا لَهُ الْحُسْنَى فَقَطْ وَمَنْ ذَا مَا سَاءَ قَطْ. We all do wrong. A famous poet, he says that if you're asking for a perfect individual, you've asked for something that's inconceivable. You've asked for something that's impossible. Who do you know? Who do you know that only has good and nothing wrong in his character? And who is only bad and has no good in him? Everybody that you know has some flaws. Some flaws. Some people's flaws are apparent. Other people's flaws are internal. You only get to know maybe after marriage, or after you spend 5 years with them, or after you trade with them, or after you travel with them. But there's no doubt that each one of us, we have elements of human error. And we have elements of negligence. And we do things day in and day out which are wrong. Doing something wrong, there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, because as human beings we err. And as Imam al-Farra and many others say, that al-insan, people say that insan comes from the word nisyan. It means the forgetful creature that keeps on forgetting. Right? In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes himself, وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. Allah is the one who doesn't forget. But we have the opposite traits to our Creator. We are the ones who forget. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that when Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, he forgot about Allah's command, فَنَسِيَ وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. He forgot about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command, and so we didn't find in him any determination, any motivation to abstain from the haram, to abstain from the tree. Ask yourself, when you commit a sin, Are you fully aware what you're doing? Or has your temptations and desires overtaken you to an extent where you're deluded? Because the Quran calls this situation as jahala. We commit sins. Believers who commit sins don't commit sins in their normal state. You commit sins when shaitan comes and beautifies that sin for you. You commit sin when you forget about the penalty and the punishment that will happen to you. If, for example, somebody sees a beautiful girl and he gets all types of thoughts, and the Arabs, they would love beautiful women. And if you read some of the poetry from back in the days, you'll see that they talk about women in every different way. One of them says, for example, وَرُبَّ سَوْدَاءٍ وَبَيْضَاءُ مَعْنًا نَافِسُ الْمِسْكِ فِي اسْمِهَا الْكَافُورِ. He says, she may look really dark-skinned and she might be coloured, but she's like the musk. You know the musk? You look at it and it's dark and it's brown, but once you open it, it's full of fragrance. So basically he's trying to describe the woman as this musk. You find others that would, generally, they're fascinated about women. One of them talks about the women who he used to watch his neighbour travel from her house to another person's house. And he used to say, مشت من بيت جارتها مشي محزون لا ريث ولا عجلة. He says she walked from her friend's house, from a neighbour's house, and the way she walked was like raindrops, when it's not too fast and it's not too slow. But the Arabs were fascinated with women, and today we're still fascinated with women because it's part of the zina of life. But what happens is that in your fascination of a woman, when you get tempted, you might commit that haram. Why have you committed the haram, whatever it may be? It's because ultimately your sense of ignorance has overtaken you. Your temptations has overtaken you. That's why the Quran says, إنما التوبة على الله للذين يعملون السوء بجهالة يعني لما يترجح الجهل على العلم. In other words, when a person commits a sin and is a believer, he may do so when he becomes negligent towards his Creator. And what takes over him is his want to fulfill desires. And so the issue isn't with you and I sinning. The issue isn't with you and I committing haram. The issue is whether you will acknowledge that or not. And this is what Younus did. The Quran tells us that لولا أن تداركه نعمة من ربه لنبذ بالعراء وهو مذموم. The Quran actually tells us that he left his people and he realized that he had committed a sin, but he acknowledged his sin, he approved of his sin, and he called out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the relevance over here is you and I, we've committed our sin in our own capacities in many different ways. Ramadan is a month of acknowledgement, of iqrar, of i'tiraf. How do I admit that I have flaws? Do I admit that I have committed sins? And if I admit my sins, then I'm in line with the sunnah of Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, because he was a person who admitted to his flaws. So what exactly was that sin? That's the question that you and I need to ask. What was that sin? So whenever prophets are appointed to take care of the people, the prophets are not allowed to leave their mission unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them that your time is over. We know this because when we look at the story of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, he could have left Mecca on many occasions. He could have left Mecca at the time when Muslims went to Abyssinia, but Allah didn't give him that consent. He could have left Mecca when the many other Sahabas migrated to Medina, but the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't leave with the earlier group. The Prophet ﷺ, even when he was in Medina, he could have gone for Hajj, but rather he went the next year. So the Prophet ﷺ's movements and all the prophets, they could only go to a different place only after obtaining the consent and permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or else they couldn't do that. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about Lut alayhi salatu wasalam, that he endured years on end with his people. His people were so twisted and so perverted that the Quran says that they became like animals. And when they saw beautiful angels who came to his house, Younus ﷺ's house, they came يُهْرَعُونَ إِلَيْهِ. They came on their four legs, running ultimately to come and abuse his guests. Yet Lut ﷺ, after facing all of this abuse, all of this accusation, after facing all of these kind of this onslaught from his people, he still didn't leave. He could have left ages ago, but he didn't leave. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hadn't decreed for him to leave. And that's why ultimately Allah says, إِنَّ مَوْعِدَهُمُ الصُّبْحِ أَلَيْسَ الصُّبْحُ بِقَرِيبٍ. In other words, it's only when the malaika said that you need to leave in the morning. You need to leave before, ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that فَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا جَعَلْنَا عَالِيَهَا سَافِلَهَا وَأَمْطَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ حِجَارَةً مِّن سِجِّيلٍ مَّنضُودٍ. So Younus ﷺ wasn't allowed to leave. In the same manner, Musa ﷺ, he was someone who had to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Mount of Tur, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him to bring also his people with him, the Banu Israel. But what did Musa ﷺ do? Because of the fact that he was really looking forward to meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? He left his people behind and he ran. And he came to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before his own people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا أَعْجَلَكَ عَنْ قَوْمِكَ يَا مُوسَى. And what has made you surpass your people? Why have you come here before them? Musa ﷺ said to him, قَالَ هُمْ أُولَٰئِ عَلَىٰ أَثَرِي. Don't worry, they're behind me following my trace. They're following my footsteps. وَعَجِلْتُ إِلَيْكَ رَبِّي لِتَرْضَى. And I came quickly to you so you can be happy with me. SubhanAllah, Musa ﷺ. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really, this is a situation where a prophet actually left his people behind, but he did it for a good purpose. He came to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the prophets are like shepherds. And if you look at the Arab shepherds, they're different from the European shepherds. Does anybody know how they're different? Does anybody know how the shepherds, how they look after their flock compared to the European and the Arab shepherds? The Arab shepherds, they follow their flock from behind. Yeah? From behind. Whereas the culture and the norm in other places is that the flock will follow from behind. So they'll be at the front, right? The dog will be doing the rounds, it'll take all the herd or the flock of sheep and put it together. But the prophets were instructed to follow their people from where? From behind. How do we know this? Where do we know this from? The Quran says, وَاتَّبِعْ أَدْبَارَهُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Prophet Lut alayhi salatu wasalam, follow them from their behind. Follow them from the behind. So the prophets not only were instructed to stay put in their position, but also when it comes to their people, they must also follow them from behind. They must be at the back and they make sure that the entire subjects are okay. Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, he said to his people, if you're not going to believe in what I've come here to say to you, and if you're not going to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then I'm going to give you an ultimatum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give you an ultimatum. And some of the reports tell us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, tell your people that they have 3 days as their ultimatum. And we find the likes of that also in this case of Salih alayhi salatu wasalam, when he said to his people, فَتَمَتَّعُوا فِي دَارِكُمْ ثَلَاثَةَ أَيَّامٍ ذَلِكَ وَعْدٌ غَيْرُ مَكْذُوبٍ. Salih said to his people, when they went and hamstrung the camel, that stay put for 3 days, enjoy yourselves for 3 days. After that, a punishment is coming to you which is going to be unleashed upon you that nobody can ever reject it. So Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, when he learned that they have 3 days to sort out their affairs, or else they're going to be wiped out and they're going to be extinct. Why? Because the people have become spiritually extinct. And when you become spiritually extinct, and when your heart is dead, when your iman is dead, then there's no good in you. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَسْتَخْلِفُ رَبِّي قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ, and Allah will exchange you for another people who will believe in Him and love Him. So because your heart is dead, because you're spiritually dead, Allah will cause your physical death now. So he went to his people and he said, look, you got 3 days and I'm getting off. In other words, Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, he should have stayed put until the what? Until the last minute. Because remember, the prophets were always rescued from the punishment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never punished the people who deserve punishment along with their prophet. The prophet was always plucked out. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ثُمَّ نُنَجِّي رُسُولَنَا, and this is the way we rescued our prophets. And who else? وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, and those who believe. كَذَلِكَ حَقًّا عَلَيْنَا نُنْجِي الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And this is the and thus it is upon us to make sure that we rescue the believing people. Subhanallah. And so in this sense, Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, himself, he got frustrated with his people. He spoke to his people and he gave them da'wah and he used every method possible, and they weren't listening to him because they were so involved in their ways, in their material, lavish lifestyles. And in fact, they were so perverted. They were a people of fahsha. They were a people of idolatry. There were people who didn't recognize that there's going to be a reckoning. There are people who didn't recognize, who didn't read the verses out there in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. They didn't ponder upon the message. Rather, they tried to character assassinate the actual man himself. And if they could character assassinate Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, then ultimately they don't have to listen to the message. Right? If, for example, you know that a teacher, if you can say, imagine you have a bunch of students in your classroom, and then before the teacher walks in, somebody says, yeah, the teacher is a bit mentally tapped. Are you going to take his lesson seriously? If somebody tells you that this guy is psychologically gone, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he's completely misguided, are you going to sit there and listen to him? He might have the best of content, he might deliver the best of lessons to you, he's got everything worked out, he's the best teacher the world has ever seen. Are you going to listen to him? Why are you not going to listen to him? Because they've tarnished his reputation, isn't it? And so because you've tarnished the reputation, anything that comes from this person, you don't want to listen. Right? And it's like, for example, if somebody says, who's your famous footballer? Messi? Like if somebody said, Allahumma, let's just say, Messi insulted, for example, your religion, and insulted the Prophet. Are you going to watch him again? No, because he might have been the best footballer in the world, but you have a problem with the character. And once you have the problem with the character, you have the problem with anything that comes from that person. So in the same way, what his people did was that they managed to tarnish his character so nobody was taking him seriously. And so, as a result, Younus alayhi salatu wasalam reached a level of frustration, and he said to his people, look, I'm going to go, you guys are going to get punished, I've got nothing to lose. Right? And that's what he said. And this is very important for us because it shows that the da'i, the one who calls towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has to have a level of tolerance more so than anybody else. A level of tolerance more so than anybody else. Trust me, da'wah is not easy, my brothers and sisters. Going from one place to another place, giving talks, speaking to people think it's an easy task. It's not, because first of all, you have to keep yourself in check, number one. Number two is that you have to make sure that you're pleasing your Creator. Number three is that you have to please everybody. And رِضَى النَّاسِ غَايَةٌ لَا تُدْرَكَ, as the Arabs say. And trying to please everybody is a goal and an aim that you can never do. And so being a da'i is actually it's not easy. People think it's easy. Just say a few quotes here and there, and give a wonderful speech, crack a few jokes here and there, and people call you the Sheikh, mashallah, you do a very good job. But then it's not like that. Da'wah isn't like that, bro. Nowadays you have this term, back in the days you have education, you have entertainment, but now you have the educators and you have the entertainers, but now you have something called the edutainers. You know the edutainers? They're basically, and you speak to them, a lot of these international speakers, they'll tell you themselves that the only way we can get the attention span of people, the way we can get engaged, we have to factor in humor and jokes. Every 2.5 minutes, we've got a method. We need to say something about personal lives. We need to say a joke, because or else people they don't listen to you, right? And so da'wah is not easy. In fact, talking about attention span, a recent psychologist did a review, and I was listening to this podcast, and they said back in like 2006 and before the whole social media revolution, the attention span of the individual was actually, does anybody know what the average attention span was of the human mind? What's the average attention span of a goldfish?
3 seconds.
3 seconds. Some say longer than that, isn't it? 8 seconds. Yeah? Or 9 seconds. Right? It depends if it's it depends what kind of fish it is. If it's from Select or if it's from Mirpur. I'm joking. But here, this what you see is that this fish. Bengalis love fish. That's why Younus alayhi salatu wasalam is the perfect topic for me, especially in Ramadan. Bit testing though. But I was speaking to Ustad Nu'man and I said, listen, don't ever talk about fish because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it in the context of ni'mah. And he says, وَهُوَ الَّذِي سَخَّرَ الْبَحْرَ He created the entire sea for you. لِتَأْكُلُوا مِنْهُ لَحْمًا طَرِيًّا So that you can eat from it fresh meat. Fresh meat. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. And I said, give me another adjective that's been attributed to meat in the Quran other than fish. Yeah, and that's it. So yeah, we love fish. Because it's the meal of Jannah, inshallah. It needs to be made properly though. I'll tell you what, I've got some Pakistani relatives and mashallah, the way they make the fish handy, yeah, it puts us to shame, frankly speaking. Yeah, I know, subhanallah. But that's the thing though, isn't it? I mean, when it comes to iftar time, we're there just hoarding ourselves so much, right, that we go and stand behind the imam and he reads Surah Al-Baqarah and we feel that we got a Baqarah in our system too. Well, in Ramadan, you see, they say that what happens is if you study I was reading an article that said that, especially in the Middle East, man, the way those guys eat. Somebody sent me a WhatsApp message yesterday. What a few Arabs are doing is that they get an entire like a goat or a lamb, and what they'll do is that they'll stuff it with pasta and rice and all the other stuffings. They'll put it in, and then they'll end up stitching the entire skin of it, and then they'll put it on onto the coal, right? And then after 2 hours, they'll take like there's vines and whatnot, and the expressions. And so one guy, he started eating it, but the sounds he was making was, let's just say, not very suitable for a man. He was eating it, he was having his iftar, and it was like, bro, I'm not sure if those expressions are right.
Mandi. Mandi is called the name of that.
It's always called Mandi. I always had inshallah, I plan, bi'idhnillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala, if Allah gives me the tawfiq, I want to go and have proper Pakhtun style karai, inshallah, in Peshawar. Not in Peshawar, what am I talking about? In Khyber Pass itself, inshallah, bi'idhnillah, if Allah gives me the tawfiq. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us enjoy good food. It's very important, not because the prophets is from the sunnah of the prophets. Ya ayyuha ar-rusul kulu min at-tayyibati wa'malu salihan. O prophets, eat from good food and do good actions. Good food leads to good actions, as simple as that. But what you find is our youth is like, Mom, give me a $5. Why do you want to go $5? I want to go have doner and chips. Doner and chips. Okay, you had it last 2 days ago, and you want it again today. And I've gone out of my way and I've roasted the entire chicken for you. Your dad's gone and bought all the stuff from the shopping, alright? And he's carried all those bags, and you want to insult me by having a dog. Should have put the no problem, he's £5. See, we don't see, if you contrast our condition with like the same people over here like about 100 years ago. If you read the book of Bill Bryson and many others, you find that people, if you were to live, imagine you came over here like 1890s, right? No Muslim around. you know what you'd be eating. You go and get a loaf of bread, but the historians record that you could hardly find a good loaf of bread because all of it would actually be mixed with different things. Right? The bakers will tell you this is a fresh loaf of bread, but actually they'd even have it be adulterated. You know what adulterated means? Like it's mixed with different elements. And at that time, there weren't any food scientists or any food, health and safety and food kind of commissioners who would come and look at your food. No, abadan. In fact, some say that they found remnants of human bone in bread. Because you know why? Because it would make it look fluffier. When they baked it, it'd give it more of a fluffy, and that's why you have does anybody know Jack and Beanstalk, the couplets? Do you know whether he says, and I will crush his bones to make my bread? Right? That's where he comes from, because that's what they would do. In fact, the fruit person would be saying fruits. The way he would make his cherry nice and shiny, he'll pop it in his mouth, put a bit of saliva on it, and leave it on the stove. Right? With milk that adulterated. Yeah, it's crazy the way they lived back in the days. Right? But if you look at us right now, or the way we live and the way we eat, and so much waste, la ilaha illallah. And that's why the Quran says, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِ. Let mankind look towards his food. أَنَّا صَبَبْنَا الْمَاءَ صَبًّا. How is it that we cause the water to come down? We don't think about that, you see. Yeah? Because when we get our chicken tikkas and our sikh kebabs, the last thing we think about is the goat that gave its life up and became a shaheed for us. You see, we don't think about that, but we don't think about how this animal spent its entire life ultimately to serve you. You see? But it couldn't serve you unless it had been eating on produce and whatever pasture. And the only way pasture would be made is through rainwater. And the only way rainwater comes down is through Allah's command. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always tells us to never be dismissive of these ni'am, these small blessings that we find in front of ourselves. And that's why we find that when Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, effectively when he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he called out with one of the most profound and powerful du'as that we ever find in the history of dua making, Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, he admits that he shouldn't have left his people. He shouldn't have left his people. And he became frustrated, and we know that ultimately he got onto a boat to cross the river or the stream, and what happened was, it was more than a stream, it was an ocean. What happened was, ultimately, they had to decide among themselves, because it was getting, there was a lot of wind and the climate changed, and it became quite intense. And of course, when you have giant waves just, crashing onto you, right? Somebody has to lighten the load, and so the way they would do that is they would draw lots, and so they drew lots, and then Younus alayhi salatu wasalam's name came up, and so they had to ultimately chuck him out. And so when you read about some of the accounts of the story of Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, you realize that he was chucked out, but he was saved ultimately by the whale, because it swallowed him. فَالْتَقَمَهُ الْحُوتُ وَهُوَ مُلِيمٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells it that he was ultimately swallowed by a hoot. And then he remained within the actual stomach of the whale. And if you look at whales, they're big mammals, aren't they? They're not small. They're giant species, aren't they? They're massive, right? If you look at some of the photos of whales that have been swept ashore, you'll find that people, they look tiny next to them. So this is like a big, massive place, almost as big as the EIC perhaps. You go there and you find that Younus alayhi salatu wasalam is now, he has been placed in the bottom of this boat. What does Younus alayhi salatu wasalam do? He is constantly in the state of what? Tasbih. And so the Quran reminds us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah As-Safat, وَإِنَّ يُونُسَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. And indeed Younus is from among the prophets. See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't deny, he didn't withdraw his prophethood because he did something inappropriate. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still acknowledged the fact that he was a prophet. And that's what we learned, that we may sin, but it doesn't necessarily take us away from belief. A lot of people, if you ask them on the streets, bro, why not praying to God? Bro, you know what, bro, I'll be honest with you, I do haram things in it and I don't want to come because I'm not park. SubhanAllah, you do haram, you have more reasons to go to the mosque. You have more reason to come and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In a hadith in Sahih Muslim, you find that a companion came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, I've done something grave. And the Prophet ﷺ said, what have you done? He said, I found a really nice girl, okay, and I basically expressed myself with her, and many things we shouldn't have done except for haram, except for the greater haram. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, did you just pray Asr with us? He said, yeah, I just prayed Asr with you. Then he said, As-salatu ma bayna as-salati kaffaratun. He said that one prayer to another prayer, the time in between that, the prayers actually wash away your sins. This hadith is not meant to encourage us to do haram. It's telling us that whenever we do haram, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so long as you turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will still keep you within the rank of the believers. And so your guilt should not drive you away from Allah. Remember that. Your guilt should in fact reinforce your iman. It should take you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, and He tells us that people of taqwa, the people of taqwa, are a people وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً أَوْ ظَلَمُوا. That people of taqwa are people who will definitely commit some kind of haram. Are people who will definitely commit some haram. And when they do distasteful, shameless deeds, they feel really bad. They feel what? Really bad. Are you telling me you've never committed haram? Each one of us here has committed haram. But the question isn't, when you're committing haram, are you persistent in your haram? And are you reckless in your haram? That's the question. Because if you're reckless and you're persistent in your haram, then you have a problem. I can't help you. You need to go back to your Creator. But if you do haram, but immediately you realize, oh my word, I've done something so stupid. Forgive me. Ya Allah, forgive me. وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً أَوْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. Or when they oppress themselves, ذَكَرُوا اللَّهِ. What comes to their mind immediately after the haram is what? The remembrance of Allah. فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا لِذُنُوبِهِمْ. And they do istighfar. Astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. وَمَنْ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. And who other than Allah is the forgiver of sins? وَلَمْ يُصِرُّوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلُوا وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. And so long as they don't remain persistent and adamant on their sins, and they know it, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about these people, أُولَٰئِكَ جَزَاؤُهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ. For these people are Jannah. So here's a very important lesson for all of us. That Allah will keep us within the rank of the believers, just like the way He kept Younus within the ranks of the prophets, so long as you and I admit to our sins, and we acknowledge that we've done our sin, and that we turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And especially during the month of Ramadan. Especially during the month of Ramadan. Jabir ibn Abdullah says, لا تجعل أيام فطرك وأيام صومك سواء. Don't make your affairs in Ramadan the same as your affairs outside Ramadan. You commit a sin in Ramadan, repent more in Ramadan. You committed a sin throughout the year, repent more in Ramadan. وَإِنَّ يُونُسَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. Indeed, Yunus alayhi salatu wasalam was from the prophets. إِذْ أَبَقَ إِلَى الْفُلْكِ الْمَشْحُونَ. And the Quran says, and remember when he fled to, basically, Al-Fulk al-Mashhun is talking about the ship which carried him. Okay? Now, what is إِذْ أَبَقَ? Because the Quran says, إِذْ أَبَقَ إِلَى الْفُلْكِ الْمَشْحُونَ. The word abaqa in Arabic refers to a slave. Like back in the days you couldn't buy slaves, right? It was a trend at the time, and it was a universal norm that you would buy and sell slaves. And there were huge marketplaces where slaves would be kept, right? And certain slaves, they were of different classes. So for example, class A slaves, these guys, they were like, they can build a house for you, they can do business for you. You can trust them with their money, and they'll be like a premium slaves, over there on the right, for example. You can go and buy them but they have a very, very high expensive tag. If they were on eBay, you'd have like 1,000 people watching them. But then you had different ranks. Now at the lowest rank, you had slaves who would rebel against you and not listen to you. If you told him right, he'll do left. If you told him to jump, he'll sit down. If you told him to come and make you some food, he'll make you some poison. Right? These were the low kind of slaves. But then you had a category known as the slaves who were known as the Abdun Abiq. And the Abdun Abiq are the slaves that were known, they have a track record that they run away from their master. Literally, they run away from. So basically, you get them, you buy them, and you give them a home, and you say, listen, this is your house, this is where you're going to stay, this is your pillow, if you need anything, let me know. You leave for 2 minutes, and you come back and he's gone. And then you'd have to find out where's the servant gone, and people saw, we saw him, he fled that way, and then they'd capture him and then bring him again. And then place him back in the actual house again. This was a category of slaves that existed back in the days. And they were known as Abdun Abiq. So quite interestingly, the Quran uses the same vocabulary when describing Younus alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah says, إِذْ أَبَقَ إِلَى الْفُلْكِ الْمَشْحُونِ. In other words, he went away before his duty was fulfilled. So he's like a slave who didn't fulfill his task and he went away. Right? إِذْ أَبَقَ إِلَى الْفُلْكِ الْمَشْحُونِ. And so then the Quran says, فَسَاهَمَ فَكَانَ مِنَ الْمُدْحَضِينَ فَالْتَقَمَهُ الْحُوتُ وَهُوَ مُلِيمٌ. So now, ultimately, he has now been placed in the sea, the whale has swallowed him, and he sat there in the belly of the whale. And he's called out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَنَادَى فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ. Imagine how it would feel in the belly of a whale. Do you think there's going to be any light there? No? Imagine what the smell would be in the belly of the whale. Right? Imagine what it's consumed in the past few days, I don't know. But, other whales, other smaller mammals, right? Imagine the smell, right, that existed then, right, in the belly of a whale. Imagine he's calling and nobody can hear him. There's only the echo of his voice. There's no light. There's no sunlight. How many days is he in there? Allah knows. Is he thirsty? Oh, I'm sure he will be. Does he have the benefit of just eat? No. Does he have the benefit of ordering something? No. Does he have any drink? No. He's stuck in the belly of a mammal. This isn't a joke. I mean, people, when they read the story, think, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, he was stuck in the belly of a mammal. I'd like to try that out someday. You don't want to, my friend. Because he's not stuck in the belly of a mammal, my friend. He's stuck in the belly of a mammal, which is stuck in the belly of the sea, which is in the belly of the earth. So when the Quran says فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ, it means that it is in the depth of darkness. There's like a, inception of darkness. I mean, if he was stuck in the sea, that's one thing, but he's stuck inside the belly of a mammal within the belly of the sea. And so who's going to listen to him now? But Younus alayhi salatu wasalam didn't give up. Because he knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Sami'un Basir. He knows that Allah is all-seeing, all-knowing. He knows the whispers of His servants. He knows what goes through you. Can you imagine, subhanAllah, Allah is fully aware of the condition of Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, and is fully in control of the condition of Younus alayhi salatu wasalam. And He is in full control as to where the whale is actually heading. And so sometimes when you and I, we find ourselves stuck in a dark, dark place in life, we need to resort to the same rescue plan that Younus alayhi salatu wasalam had. And that ultimately is in one thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, فَلَوْلَا أَنَّهُ كَانَ مِنَ الْمُسَبِّحِينَ. And had Younus alayhi salatu wasalam not been from one of those who do tasbih, who do what? Tasbih. Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, astaghfirullah. All of these are tasbih. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if he wasn't from one of those who did tasbih, then what? لَلَبِثَ فِي بَطْنِهِ إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. Then he would have remained in the belly of this whale, right until the Yawm al-Qiyamah. Right until the Yawm al-Qiyamah, subhanallah. So what ultimately protected Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, what ultimately saved him from the condition that he was in, from the darkness that he was going through, was ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, people when they become depressed because they feel that they're in some dark place, what do? They feel that nobody can sense my pain. And if you especially sisters, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our sisters, because you know they're much more soft and empathetic and emotional, and at times, you know, when they feel that nobody can sense my pain, they might even resort to cutting themselves. You have this. You know, in fact, if you read the story of Princess Diana, she went through a phase where she was depressed and she used to cut herself. She couldn't express it, and she was a part of the royal family. And she talks about how, in fact, she became bulimic because nobody can sense her pain, and that's the way she would feel comforted, by eating and binge eating and then throwing everything up. People resort to different things. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of Muslim youth who live in pocket communities, you ask them when things go wrong, what do they do? Hang around with the mates, go to some place, pull out the Rizla, put a bit of vegetables in, and they'll start having it. If you understand what I mean. Why? Why are you escaping to? To whom are you escaping to? You're kidding yourself. You're kidding yourself. You're aggravating your symptoms. You're making your problems worse. And I'll call that. You know, she'll give me a nice time. You know, I'll give her a call. Perhaps. What? To who are you kidding? This escape that you think is an escape is actually an opening to the door of hell. It's actually, in the meantime, you think you're actually improving your condition, but if you escape anywhere other than Allah, you're going to have a hard time. وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي, for butchers, you're going to get the wrong outcome. It's as simple as that. Right? And so, by escaping into something haram, what you don't realize is that you're actually harming yourself more. Right? Other people have less severe symptoms. You know, you find people, even adults, who lock themselves up and they'll just play like Assassin's Creed for like 3 days in a row. Can't bother with life anymore. Can't bother with my business. Can't bother with my wife. Wait, where are you escaping to? I ask you. Escape to Allah. Escape to Allah and you'll find everything. And that's why when people, the believers, when they face a calamity, what do they say? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Unfortunately, Muslims only say it when somebody dies. You're meant to say it in every single moment. You have a car crash, don't say, you know, all the wrong stuff, which of course I can't say, but you know. Say inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Because you realize ultimately you're owned by Allah, and anything you own is owned by Allah, and Allah governs your affairs. Inna lillahi means indeed I belong to Allah. I'm a servant, I'm owned by Him, He possesses me. Wa inna ilayhi raji'un, and I'm going to go back to Him, so I've got nothing to lose. No matter what condition I'm going through, I know my result, and that's good. I'm going to go back to Allah. And He owns me, and everything I own, He owns, so I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to go back to Allah. Wa inna ila rabbika ruj'a, I'm going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Younus alayhi salatu wasalam, his escape wasn't him trying to find another escape. His escape was Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test you and me like this throughout our lives. We'll be stuck somewhere in a dark place. And this is when we need to only escape to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to cancel out all the wrong voices and the negative feelings and all the tempting opportunities that are presented in front of us, and we must say no. And we must go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we do that, and if we truly do that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give in return better days, a better future, a brighter prospects, more prospects in our lives. And that's why Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says that inna fil qalbi la wahshatun la yuziluha illa al-inaba ila Allah. the heart has a certain sense of loneliness and a feeling of strangeness that can never ever be removed except for a complete dedication to Allah. Dedicate yourself this Ramadan, my brothers and sisters. Put away any haram that you know that you do. Just put it away. Say enough is enough. I've had enough fun at the expense of my deen. I don't wish to do that. I'm no longer going to escape to the haram. And as the Prophet ﷺ has said, that whenever somebody gives up a haram for Allah, Allah will replace him with something better and better and better. I'm putting away this business because I know that it's haram profit. I'm not going to do it. Watch, Allah will open up something. You know, Nawab restaurant. You know Nawab restaurant? Everyone who doesn't know Nawab restaurant? Everyone knows Nawab restaurant. It's like the Muslim McDonald's. You know. So, well, I remember that the brother, when we were studying in the college days, mashallah, he became very practicing. And he went and convinced his father and he said, we're not doing any more alcohol, or else I'm not going to work here. And he convinced his uncle and he convinced his father and they got rid of alcohol. But they were really concerned because a lot of the profit of that business is what? Is hinged on the alcohol and whatnot. And they said, look, it's either going to be a make or break. He said, no, inshallah, Allah will take care of it. They said that once they got rid of the alcohol, their business reached peak in terms of profitability. Even till today, it's booming, and it still is, even after getting rid of it. And this is true. It's a true case study, right? This is how it works. You know, what's really funny is we were in a mosque. I'm not going to mention which one. And then there was somebody from the audience. Blatantly, they have a restaurant where they sell alcohol and it's fully licensed. So, you know what, in the mosque, whenever they give money, they try and encourage one another. So people get up and people like, Fulan Saab ne 1000 pound, you know, whatever, they give up on charity. So one person, he gave it, and everybody knows that his restaurant is full of alcohol. So he gave money and he said, you know, something Saab, pound, you know, fi sabilillah, say, I don't know, my Urdu is not very good. And then somebody stood from the audience and said, Lekin, Mawlana Sahab, ye restaurant mein sood bechte hain. You know, sell alcohol over there, it's not right. The Mawlana Sahab said, मैं कितने मर्तबा आप लोगों को कहा कि इस रेस्टोरेंट में 2 सेक्शन है, एक सेक्शन अल्कोहल फ्री है और दूसरा सेक्शन में अल्कोहल है, हम सिर्फ जो अल्कोहल फ्री से इधर से लेते हैं. I said, MashaAllah, inshallah, Mawlana Sahab's an accountant now, he's gone through the auditing as well. Allah protect us, Allah. You've got to be, can't mess around in life, you've got to be serious. Allah's watching us. Allah's watching you. He knows every move, every harakah. He knows every leaf when it falls, and whether it's moist or whether it's dry. Can you imagine that? You can't escape Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so don't try it. Do haram, ask Allah for forgiveness, and ask Allah to guide you. But don't continue in Ramadan, put it away. And so what we learn then is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that ultimately فَنَبَذْنَاهُ بِالْعَرَاءِ وَهُوَ مَذْمُومٌ فَاجْتَبَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَجَعَلَهُ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allah tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ultimately commanded the whale then to throw him up, to vomit him out, okay, onto the shore, right? And there are many reports to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, when he came out, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَهُوَ مَذْمُومٌ. He was humiliated because of what he had done. But listen to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. Because of his tasbih, and because Younus alayhi salatu wasalam didn't give up hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah says, فَاجْتَبَاهُ رَبُّهُ. And Allah selected him, and Allah chose him, and he made him from the pious. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. From the humiliation he went through, from the difficult trials he went through, sat in the belly of this whale, in the belly of the sea, not knowing what's going to happen to him, what his prospects are, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala eventually got him out of this condition, and then he said we made him into someone pious. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says وَأَنْبَتْنَا عَلَيْهِ شَجَرَةً مِّن يَقْطِينٍ. And then on top of that, we also, next to where he was, imagine how hungry he would be. Imagine how dehydrated he would be, how malnourished he would be. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and then we caused a plant to grow. Some say it's the pumpkin plant that grew. He was able to eat from that. He was able to nourish himself with that. And then he was able to regain his strength again. And no doubt that he was one of the greatest of people who regretted what he had done, but he turned back to Allah, remained dedicated, and he didn't give up hope. He didn't escape towards his own desires, he escaped towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us a people who run to Him, escape to Allah, not escape to ourselves or anything else. And whenever we are stuck in any darkness or any depressive episode in life, we can find optimism in our Creator. Optimism is key. Younus remained optimistic. Let me tell you something about optimism. The psychologists, they did a case study between two children. They found, because there's a hikmah. The Prophet, there's hikmah in a tradition that says that al-fa'lu min husn al-khuluq, being optimistic, having good hope in Allah, being positive because you know that Allah's creator is going to sort out your affairs, is from a good character of a Muslim. وَالشُّؤْمُ مِنْ سُوءِ الْخُلُقِ, but being pessimistic is from the bad character, right? Like you have like, for example, like someone who will say at 11 o'clock, guys, let's go for some dessert, right? You have one of the friends will be like, nah bro, no point going at this time, it's going to be closed by the time we get there. Yeah, that's what the pessimistic guy will tell you. Optimistic guy says, nah, let's just go there. If it's closed, then we had some fun, bro. We're in the car, we're chilling together, you know what I'm saying? We're going together, it's nice, there's a nice breeze out there, even if we don't get enough. That's what an optimistic guy will say. But the pessimistic guy will say, nah, what's the point? You're going to waste your fuel. You're going to go out this time. Bro, yard it, forget it. So when you get there eventually, and the shutters are locked, the optimistic guy will say, alhamdulillah, at least we got a ride out of it. The pessimistic guy will say, see, I told you, bro. Don't listen to me, innit? That's pessimism. You see, when we look down at everything in life, right, you lose out on opportunities, my friends. But look at this. So they did a program, they did this experiment, the psychologists. They got an optimistic person, they got an optimistic 4-year-old, or like a young girl, and then they got a pessimistic boy. The same, I think year 4 it was. And what happened was, the pessimistic boy, what they did was, they put him in a room full of toys, every toy and every sweet in the world. And they said to him, listen, we're going to leave you behind, and you have 1 hour. And then they took this girl who was always happy, she used to like rejoice and be happy for whatever reason. And they took her to, to a shed, like a barn. And they said to her, you've got 1 hour, do whatever you want. What you can do in a barn which is full of cow dung and horse manure? Can you imagine that? Cow dung and horse manure. You got 1 hour, okay, for me to do what? What do you want me to do? Clean up? So, after an hour, they went back to Toys R Us, or whatever the place where it was. And they found that the pessimistic boy was sat in the same place with his arm folded like this, grumpy. His teachers say he was always grumpy. And they found him grumpy, and it's full of toys. Every kid wants toys, and every kid wants sweets. And they said, why are you so grumpy? He said, well, you give me all of these toys, and you give me all of these sweets, and you only give me 1 hour. What am I going to do in an hour? And then they went to the shed, and guess what they found when they opened it up? They found that the girl was swimming in horse manure. And they said, what are you doing? She said, there's manure here. Isn't that a sign that there's a donkey somewhere? She's optimistic. And so optimism will drive you towards opportunities, give you hope, it will drive you in the right direction. Pessimism will bring you down. Younus wasn't a pessimist, he was an optimist. And that's why I'm asking you. I'm asking you to be an optimist. Just like Younus. Ultimately Allah protected him and he regained his honor and is mentioned in the Quran till today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alayhi salatu wassalam, Allah raise his ranks, and we send our peace and praise upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all the prophets. I pray that you have a good Ramadan. Make dua for your brother, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless my dear brother Nabil, and also all the other brothers who are working very hard, Brother Imran, and all the other brothers. Forgive me, I'm not very good at names. MashaAllah, you're doing a wonderful job. I always liken to the mosque, like the ambience over here, like the atmosphere, especially like the carpet and the screen. But more than that, I like the people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Assalamu alaikum. I met the themes.